The aging aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov was commissioned as the Cold War ended and has long stood as a floating reminder of Russian blue water ambition. Its operational record, however, is modest. Frequent propulsion failures, heavy smoke and limited opportunities for fixed-wing flying have weakened its credibility. When the vessel entered a scheduled overhaul in 2017, planners announced a 4-year timetable. 8 years later the hull remains immobile, its future unclear. Technical setbacks tell only part of the story. The dock supporting the ship sank after an unexpected power outage, and a falling crane punched a hole in the flight deck large enough to swallow a truck. 2 separate onboard fires caused casualties and destroyed wiring. Key radar and missile systems were removed for refurbishment but never reinstalled. Industry officials admit that expertise for precision work on a 60,000-ton hull has eroded since Soviet times. Fiscal pressure deepens the challenge. Sanctions restrict imported alloys and electronics, while ground operations in Ukraine draw resources away from naval modernization. Russian officials calculate that finishing the refit would consume billions of rubles, enough to build several new frigates. Scrapping the ship would leave Russia without a carrier, but the loss would be largely symbolic, because the surface fleet increasingly relies on corvettes and submarines rather than carrier strike groups. Symbolism remains potent. Among the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, Russia is the only state whose carrier capability hangs in limbo. Moscow's military elites grew up equating big-deck ships with strategic weight, a link nurtured by Soviet ocean-going deployments from Cuba to Angola. Retiring Kuznetsov would require recalibrating that identity. Submarines are invisible but carriers are camera-friendly. Whether that reputational cost outweighs the savings is now a central theme in the Kremlin's deliberations. Operational shortfalls multiply the cost. Kuznetsov's last combat cruise to the Mediterranean in 2016 ended with 2 fighter jets lost after arrestor gear malfunctions. Pilots qualified for Su-33 and MiG-29K fighters have since retired faster than replacements can be trained. Deck crews have dispersed to other assignments. Even if the ship returned to sea late in the decade, rebuilding a cohesive air wing would take years. Some commentators suggest selling the hull. China is often named, having bought Kuznetsov's unfinished sister ship, now the Liaoning, more than 2 decades ago. Yet Beijing's priorities have shifted. It has already built Shandong and is testing Fujian, its first catapult carrier. Investing in a second-hand ski jump deck would divert money and personnel from newer designs. Any life Kuznetsov could regain would be short, and its oil-fired boilers conflict with China's move toward integrated electric propulsion. Even the salvage option is complicated. Hazardous materials, including asbestos and residual fuel, would need specialized handling. Only a handful of Russian yards possess the cranes and cutters able to break the hull safely, and all of them are already booked with other work. Moscow therefore faces 2 stark options. The first is to pour money, manpower and scarce yard capacity into a protracted refit with uncertain payoff. The second is to accept that the current strategic reality no longer supports a single aging carrier and to redirect funds toward projects with clearer value, such as nuclear submarines, hypersonic missiles and land-based naval aviation. Russia's recent combat experience in Syria showed that land airfields can sustain high sortie rates at a fraction of carrier cost. A verdict has not yet been issued, yet the suspension of work is telling. Prestige alone cannot keep a warship afloat. Whether Admiral Kuznetsov is dismantled, placed in reserve or converted into a museum, the episode underscores a broader lesson. Capital ships cannot thrive without shipyards, suppliers and training pipelines that match their scale. For Russia, future maritime power may depend less on a lone flat top and more on flexible forces that can be built and maintained close to home waters.